I made a little punk project for my first video and decided to use it to learn more game though. So I made an update, added in new game modes, a problem setting, and a few Easter eggs to make the game a little better. So you can download the game in the description so you can try it yourself. So as soon as you open the game, you'll notice there's now the new node structure, which is a play button and a not working options button and a quit button. You will also notice that when you enter the mouse in any button, it will play a little sound, and if you press it, it will play a different sound. To do this, I connected the mouse entered function and called the play function with all the buttons, so an audio stream player node plays whenever the mouse enters or presses the button. The options button is not doing anything now, but I plan to add a settings menu in the game update. Then the quit button calls the getTree.quit function to simply close the game, and the play button will redirect to a new menu scene where you can customize the gameplay before you press start. I based this design on the Xbox 360 settings menu, which features two panels, one on the left for interaction with the user, another in the right to efficiently explain the setting to the user in case they don't fully understand what they are doing. It may also remind you to Minecraft Legacy Edition with the use of sliders and toggle buttons to change between game modes and customize gameplay. And the last reference is a little preview of the game that the user will have as if it was a Devil May Cry 4 skill shop, where you could see the list of combos available for each character and watch a little in-game demonstration. The node setup is a bit overwhelming, but the result is quite nice. I had a root, a made container, and an HBox container to enter the menu and divide the interface in both panels. Then I added two panel containers, and on each one I added a label node to caption. On the left, it will just say new game. On the right, it will have the title of the very first option I will have. On each panel, I added a bbox container on the left to manipulate the gameplay values using labels right before the UI elements, and on the right to add another label node for each setting description. I added a huge start button outside the left, a bbox container, and an animated sprite node for the right panel. There were three game modes I wanted for the game: the classic PvE, PvP, and a relaxing solo mode. So I'm adding this H slider that can only scroll around 3 values. Then the PvE will have 4 difficulties: easy, medium, hard, and hardcore. So we add another age slider that can only scroll from 0 to 1. I also made a different score formula, so I will add a check button to choose between the classic and new scoring systems. I also managed to make an autopilot for lazy players, so I added another check button to allow having autopilot in the gameplay or not. Now that I had all set up, I had to script all the behavior, which was like 230 lines for scripting. It was tough. The script extends a control node since it's a UA scene, and I set 4 variables for each gameplay value setting. Next step was to make all nodes to change their corresponding values, so I connected the value change function from the H sliders and the toggle function from the check buttons. Now I just had to make the gameplay variables to match the default values of the UI elements when the scene is loaded, then make their functions to modify the value accordingly. It was time to have the settings to have a visual impact in the menu, updating the text on the right side of the screen, changing the preview, and enabling or disabling elements depending on the gameplay style the user chooses. To do that, I made 4 functions that modify the settings, title, and descriptions. I dragged the text nodes and wanted to change the script and type the text I wanted it to say. I also used these functions to enable or disable the elements that are not needed in certain settings, and played different animations on the preview animated sprite to the node. Ultimately, I passed the update text functions when the H sliders values are changed, when the check buttons are toggled, and when the mouse enters the elements. Finally, I used the match logic to have the start button to change to the correct scenes, depending on the settings the user has just modified, so I made all possible versions of the game in separated scenes, so the player can experience the game in the way they want to. Which leads me to how I made the rest of the game modes, difficulties, scoring systems, and the use of autopilot. For the solo mode, I just removed some elements from the game, like the right paddle, the scoring system, and the line in the middle. I replaced the right area 2D node with a static body 2D. Then I added a text phase that I wanted to change depending if the player is doing OK or not. To have that behavior, I added an area 2D node with a collision shape 2D of the same size of the hitbox of the player and the ball. I added the player's area 2D to a group named left, so we can now go to the balls script and connect the area entered functions to the script and call the root game to change the label to other phases. Difficulties was the easiest part. See, the opponent paddle AI had these little randomness values that nerfed its movement. So to make the difficulties, I just had to increase and decrease the values to have 4 levels. The lower the nerf value, the higher the difficulty. For the multiplier, my idea of the new scoring system was that the score will now be multiplied by the streak of the ball hits the battle's half. So I added 2 more labels below the score to display the current multiplier values. I added both multiplier variables in the game script and created the new math that will apply to the new scoring system. To have the multiplier value to increase when a paddle hits the ball, I did the same I did on the solo mode, which is adding an area 2D node with a collision shape 2D node of the same size of the hitbox on both paddles. Then add the player's area 2D to the left group and the opponent's to the right. So we can again go to the balls script and connect the area entered function to the script and call the root game to change the variable for the corresponding paddle. The autopilot was also easy. I pasted the whole opponent movement code into the player's script, added a variable to set if the autopilot is active or not, and set an input to switch between the autopilot and the manual controller. As the last thing to add to the update, I wanted to give my first try on game settings, so I decided a small slider in the bottom of the pause menu by adding an HBox container with a label for the settings name, the very H slider to manipulate the volume, and 2 labels on the right for the volume and the percentage sign. The volume H slider will be scrollable from 0 to 100. I connected the value change function to the pause menu. It strings its value to the label at its right and calls the streamer functions that handle the volume. The volume function sets the volume for a specific audio bus, converting the linear slider value to decibels using the linear to dB function. It then sets the volume of the master audio bus to the calculated decibel value. Linear to dB function converts a linear value 0 to 100 to a decibel value, clamping the input value between 0 and 100 and applying a curve factor to the normalized value to adjust the curve of the volume change from a range of 0.0 to 1.0 to a range of -72.0 to 0 decibels. Using the linear remap function, remaps a value from one range to another, taking an input value and linearly maps it from the range from min to max to the range to min to max. These functions work together to adjust the volume based on the slider's value, providing smooth and user-friendly way to control audio levels. And those are all the major changes I added to the game. Then I pasted play functions to almost everything I could in the game to have nice sounds to UI elements. I also added 2 Easter eggs to the game. There was actually 1 already in the first version. Well, now it's 2 of them. The new one is quite easier than the first one, so if you can find them, let me know in the comment section. I plan to add more settings on the next update and maybe some visual and audio enhancements. Maybe more. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope this devlog is helpful for you. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment. Feel free to request any tutorial you want me to make, and I'll see you in the next video.